Why do we sit here being silent, watching our leaders turn into tyrants? Have they forgotten which side they're fighting for? Checks and balances set aside and rule of laws, youth and ours, and Constitution openly ignored. Man, I'm not okay. Think we are being played. Is it time for right and left to join a greater cause? Man, I'm not okay. The rich claim to be victimized just to attack the marginalized. This 1% really worth more than all the sick and poor. Always preaching about fellowship while planning their dictatorship. Now we've seen how all of this plays out before. Man, I'm not okay. Think we are being played. Time for you and I to join our country's call. Man, I'm not okay. Ever wonder all the mystery, why they whitewash our history? Keep dividing is their plan. All in all, such a scam. Algorithm very sly, only used to spread the lies. Politicians know well, hate is simple to upsell. Man, I'm not okay. Think we are being played. Time for you and I to join our country's call.
We are not okay. America is not okay, and we all know that. Former Congressman Joe Walsh, this is The Social Contract with Joe Walsh. Let's figure out how to get okay together. Hey, everybody, punch those red hearts. Welcome to what I promise will not be a boring conversation. I cannot wait to talk to my guests today. Welcome. Come on in, everybody. Here they come, Ted Dintersmith. Come on in. Welcome. Crazy, crazy week, crazy political week, as always. We may get into some of that in this conversation. Punch your red hearts. Make sure you can hear me and my guest, Ted Dintersmith. Ted, say hello.
Hello. Following instructions. I'm good at that.
Hey, by the way, not a bad radio voice, Ted. Not a bad radio
Not
voice.
a good one. No, you're way ahead of me on that front. I will never narrate my own books.
It's a fascinating exercise to do, though. Welcome, everybody. Come on in for what will be an interesting Wednesday afternoon conversation on issues and a topic that we all need to be talking about. My guest today is someone I call a friend, someone who I just am in awe of what he does to try to, I'll say it, broadly speaking, make sure this democracy survives. His name is Ted Dintersmith, a one-time very successful venture capitalist. He's an author, a film producer. I described you, Ted, as a huge advocate for education and innovation in education. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think for aligning what we ask kids to get good at in school with what actually matters later in life. And if we get that wrong, which we have for decades, we pay an enormous penalty.
We're going to talk, guys, a lot about the issue of education because Ted has next week on the 24th a great new book coming out called Aftermath, the life-changing math that schools won't teach you. I'm going to promote this book incessantly for the next week or so. Ted, start where you just ended. For how long have our schools not been doing what they need to be doing?
Well, you have to go back in time a bit, but there were long stretches where we had it right. You know, in an agricultural era, we had the one-room schoolhouse that sort of topped out at grade 8 to teach really basic skills. That made sense. As we shifted to the industrial era in 1893, this august committee of 10 said, wait, the world's changing. Let's go from the one-room schoolhouse to these factory models to expressly designed to teach young adults rote skills
Yeah.
and to actively and intentionally erode creativity, curiosity, and agency. Because if you're preparing young adults to work on a factory line or
Yeah.
to be a white collar paper shuffler, you want compliant adults who can do the same thing over and over again, quickly, accurately, without making mistakes.
So they knew, Ted, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were setting up.
Yeah, it was actually, and it worked really well. I mean, it worked really well. Then, around the mid-80s, and it's a Hemingway, gradually and then suddenly,
Yeah.
but as computers emerged, the internet emerged, automation emerged, things just changed,
Yeah.
and rote skills declined, right? When I got out of high school in 1970, dating myself, I'd say 99% of the jobs in the economy were rote skill jobs.
Yeah.
Today, we're heading towards 0%. But the choice we made as a country wasn't to do what they did in 1893 and say it's a wholly different world. Let's totally rethink education. The choice we made was to do everything we've always done, but put higher stakes on it.
Why? Why was that choice made?
I think it was a spectacular failure of imagination and anticipation. And so, the Nations of Risk report came out in 1893. This isn't an exact quote,
Yeah.
but it said if our education system had been pushed on us by a foreign country, we would declare it an act of war.
Yeah.
Everybody said, oh, and then you have these high stakes test scores that come out from a nation's report card, which I think thankfully is largely being bulldozed, not as quickly and as severely as it should. But headlines grab those test scores.
Yeah.
And then you see, well, the test scores are, we can get into how people interpret the math of those test scores, but they draw the attention.
Oh,
And it's not across a broad landscape. It is almost entirely math and reading test scores. And so we've worshiped at that. And it didn't make much progress from 83 till 2002. So we said, well, if some isn't working, more will. No Child Left Behind.
yeah.
And that didn't work. So then we have 2010. We say, well, if that's not working, let's take it up one more level with Race to the Top, Common Core. Every kid has to go to college. They all need
Yeah.
to be immersed in academic only content. And our only real goal is higher test scores. And Joe, that chase for higher test scores is, in fact, what has destroyed America. And
So
people say, wait a minute, test scores and the functioning of our democracy? What? I don't get that. Why are they connected? They are intrinsically connected.
Everybody, as you're joining us, I'm talking to one of my most favorite people on the planet, Ted Dintersmith, an author, a filmmaker, a guy who's dedicated the last number of years of his life to helping to improve education in this country. Came out with a great book, Ted, 2016. This came out.
That came out in 2018, but it was based on I went in a single now, I'm gonna just tell everybody who's watching and listening to why they should just get off now, right? So first, I leave an unbelievably fun, lucrative career in venture capital, knowing a lot about AI,
Yeah.
to switch gears and take on the almost impossible mission of changing schools, which is a cash drainer and a time sink. And then in 2015 and 16, just to understand what's going on in our schools and to learn from our educate. I'm a huge fan of our teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, they are dedicated, they are committed. It is doing the most important God's work. We underpay them, we don't trust them, we don't give them the respect they deserve. So I said, like, I can't be one of the more asshole business guy who just tosses in opinions over the transom. I want to get out and learn from them. So I spent 10 and a half months, went to every single state, visited over 200 schools.
Wait. Back up.
Yeah.
You basically took a road trip across America, over 200 schools in every state?
Well, 200 schools total across all 50 states.
Wow.
And I spent a third of my time in rural America, which so many people don't do. I
Yeah.
was in like a Western tribal village in Alaska, Native American reservation in South Dakota, inner city, you name it. Because, I mean, I'm not bragging here. I was able to fund it myself. And I
Yeah.
think most people who offer opinions about education go to where the fees are.
Yeah.
And so they will go to the well-off communities that can afford to have them there, and then they'll draw conclusions based on what's going on there. I just went to where the kids are. And I write this book, and I
What'd
sell it.
you learn and what'd you see?
Well, I celebrate the bright spots. My goal has always been not to tell people what I'm a venture guy by background, right? So as a venture guy, that defines my approach in life.
And by the way, to interrupt Ted, this is the book based on his travels that he wrote that came out in 2018. What school could be.
Yeah,
Continue, Ted.
yeah. And by the way, I did not intend to write the book when I started that trip.
Oh,
My only goal was to learn from teachers.
yeah,
And as I say, as a venture guy, my goal in life is to find out what someone else's dreams are and then say, "How can I support you?" And, that runs through the film people I work with, it runs
yeah,
through my view with business people, the entrepreneurs I supported, and it runs through everything I think about school. And so what do I celebrate? I celebrate when teachers have the autonomy to help kids find what they're interested in and help them go deep on it. I celebrate principals who work with their teachers and say, "What dreams do you have that could help your kids be engaged and learn important skills? I've got your back." Or principals, vice versa, with superintendents who say, "You want to do something bold and innovative? I'll cover for you. I'll make sure you don't take those slings and arrows." And, it's like, that's what makes us human,
I'm
right?
I'm thinking, Ted, you found that those were the exceptions to the
Oh,
rule.
totally the exceptions. And you have to work hard. That's why 10 and a half months to come out. And at the end, I mean, maybe halfway through, I started to think maybe this should be a book, and I was probably I hate social media, even though my venture firm was the first round investor of Twitter, I have to admit. But I mean, like, I stayed a mile away from it, but, and pay a penalty for that, I think, in trying to promote a
Yeah,
new book, for instance. But, I didn't do social media on that trip, but I wasn't doing sound clips. I was just sitting down and having these discussions,
yeah,
some big group things and a lot of one-on-one. And you probably see the same thing. One thing that struck me, a bunch of things struck me, but I do these big group events, and then I just say, "I'll stay here as long as anybody wants to talk to me." Kind of what you do with your
yeah.
event. And it was almost always the last person that was so interesting.
Mm.
That person that would just wait and wait and wait and then talk to me about something deeply personal. And I learned so much from that. And often, occasionally, it was something really great about school. Often, it was how school punished them, you know?
What I don't wanna say depressed you the most based on this experience? What really bummed you out the most after doing this about our schools?
Yeah, if you go back and we can put in your show notes my first film, so
Yeah.
I got started with a film called Most Likely to Succeed, and we
Mhm.
did all the filming on that in 2013 and 14. Uh, Great director, so I can't take credit for its quality, but it premiered at Sundance, the
Mm.
hardest film festival to get into in the world.
Yeah,
2% acceptance rate, so very good film. And then I turned down Netflix. You're like, "Oh my gosh." People just say like, "How dumb can Ted be?" And then the answer is oftentimes quite dumb. But I turned down Netflix and I said, I made this film to take it to communities, to bring people together, to
yeah.
watch it as a group and then discuss it. We've done with that film over 10,000 community screenings. But the
Wow.
thing I would love people who check this film out on your show notes, watch the first 15 minutes. Because that first 15-minute stretch, we show computers beating Gary Kasparov at chess. We show Watson beating Ken Jennings at Jeopardy. And we show computers writing better prose than most journalists. And we lay out what it means for kids and communities as technology subsumes more and more and more of the road in our lives, what skills actually matter. And I do take some credit, for being a bit of a Paul Revere, like going
Yeah.
all over the country. And you ask what's been nagging at me or I think everybody was super excited. They see this vision of kids going deep on their passions, cutting across disciplines, doing projects that could actually show other people that affected positive change, failing, getting back up, failing, getting back up, failing, getting back up. Teachers trusted to teach to their passions and interests. And I say all that, and you'll say, well, of course that's what's going on in school. And it isn't, right? I mean, you have to look to find them. It's just been 10 and a half months to find those stories. What's been I think the issue is with a lot of advance warning, I feel like I've been out there saying this is what we should be doing in a world where most people we just need higher test scores, we need more kids going to college. That would be successful,
Is
and I think we're paying for that.
Ted, is that systemic? Why don't the leading thinkers within the education industry understand what you understand?
In back to my math book, and we could talk about that,
Yeah.
but I have this one of the things I talk about that's a math idea, but it's sort of in words people can understand is anecdote anxiety. And we don't teach kids the skills, and very few adults have the ability to sort through an occasional stray sensational anecdote from a meaningful trend. And so in a non-political way, let's take driverless cars, which is an example I use. There are millions and millions of miles driven today by driverless cars in America. So far, 2 fatalities, arguably neither one the fault of the driverless car. 3 weeks ago, a big headline about a driverless car hitting a cat. Like, as though, I mean, every day, 100 to 150 traffic fatalities due to human-driven cars. I don't even know how many cats are killed daily by human-driven cars. But those headlines then lead people to think, aha, those driverless cars aren't safe yet. We'd better put in place restrictions.
Okay.
Let's slow that down until they're perfect. And we let perfect be the enemy of good. And you can amp that up if we wanted to veer into political things. It's like, a few violent crimes by certain types, like this immigrant did this, so we'll pass, like a stray anecdote. I mean, these are important, tragic anecdotes. And I'm not dismissing the pain of those around that. But you can't turn every stray anecdote into a meaningful trend. Like you've got to be able to weigh the evidence and be able to deal with data. We don't teach that in schools, right? We teach kids, how to do arc secants or prove cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1. And like, how can we miss something really important that we need to navigate life and make sense of information, instead spend all this time on stuff nobody ever uses?
That voice and brain belongs to Ted Dintersmith, former venture capitalist, author, film producer, dedicated to trying to improving the education in this country. Follow Ted on Substack. He is on Substack. That's how come he's here. Follow him, subscribe to him. He puts out interesting, cogent, weekly thoughts. But Ted, before we get into
maybe the only time each week I get near cogency.
He does.
We all have that stray anecdote. Don't assume it's normal for me.
And we're going to get into this book, Aftermath, here in a second. That comes out next week. His second book on education. But Ted, just a bigger, broader question. You're talking about this technological change that began early mid-'80s, 40, 50 some years ago, and our schooling still hasn't even almost attempted to catch up.
I would say not only not attempted to catch up, gotten worse, right? Because doing the wrong thing, we've decided that what will work is doing the wrong thing more intensely. So it's not working now. Actually those test scores, we made that the all-consuming goal of schools. Every time you read a story, it's math and reading scores, how good a school is, how good a district is, how good a state is, math and reading scores. And that's been you ask any teacher, what has been the impact of No Child Left Behind? What has been the impact of tests? They say it's driven the joy and fun out of the profession. They made my life miserable. My kids are bored. And I know that they're not learning what they need to know. And I think they're grateful when some business guy comes along who took the time to talk to them and then writes a book. I mean, I'm very proud. And, I'll hear from people all the time, well, those schools are never going to change because of those darn teachers unions. And my book talks about central offices, which I think sometimes can be, morasses of bureaucracy. But that's not the teaching force. And the teachers in the field that are union members are that's a tiny amount of their lives.
Yeah.
And in a world where you might make one stray comment and be fired, maybe you could say, if I were in the field, I might want that protection. But I got the Friend of Education Award from NEA I'm the only business guy to get that. Thurgood Marshall and LBJ. And when they talked to me about it, they said, we know you actually were critical of some aspects of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we're grateful that somebody who's weighing in, who isn't a professional educator, admits they're not an expert, and then goes to great lengths to learn from people. And I view the classroom teachers as our education experts, and they will tell you uniformly that we have wrecked what's going on. We've driven out joy, purpose, real learning, and it's all been around this all-consuming goal to try to get higher test scores with 4 decades of failure. The definition of insanity: do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, except it's not doing the same thing, it's doing it more intensely. Wait. If it's really not getting anywhere, and and I think this is a point that I would like to make, which is, we test the bejesus out of our kids.
Yeah.
The typical US kid during their K through 12 years takes over 100 standardized exams. It's the only education category we lead the world in, is the amount we test our kids. They're administered at such scale that they have to be designed so that computers can grade it.
Oh,
And if a computer can grade it, a computer can do it. So the very narrow dimension of success in school is pushing kids to get good at exactly what computers do perfectly. And the collateral damage is huge. We drive out creativity, curiosity, agency, joy, purpose, important topics, on and on.
you, Mr. Venture Capitalist, you're a free market guy like I am. You're a believer in the notion of competition like I am. And we won't get into this right now, but I've always been sort of a school choice guy, competition. Does that factor into at all to your thinking?
You know, is my first film was about a charter school. I
Yeah.
got all sorts of grief because you're one of these guys that just think charter schools are the only one. My new film, which came out last fall, multiple choice, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
That's about a mainstream public school. Now it's like what you're saying, mainstream, like I don't really particularly focus on the governance. I focus on what kids are doing every day.
Yeah.
And my book, What School Could Be, I just go random. I'm visiting 200 schools of all types. I would say that the distribution of anecdotes, examples that I got excited by, conform exactly to the distribution of kids across school types.
Uh,
Mostly public schools, some charter schools, a couple private schools. I just look for where kids are engaged in their learning and where you can say, we're encouraging them, pushing them, requiring them, demanding that they get good at X, and X leads to hireable skills, sense of being a responsible, contributing citizen, mental health and well-being, and a sense that I'm going through a day with a sense of purpose.
yeah.
That's what I get excited about. And where that is, I don't, and I
Yeah.
say on the school choice, the biggest issue there, I think, well, there are a bunch of issues, but for certain, one is if parents chase test scores just as journalists do and policymakers do,
Yeah.
they may take their kid out of a school that's actually doing great things and put them into a school that has higher test scores,
Yeah. Right.
and not look under the covers and see, well, they're not taking the low scoring kids or they're driving them out or whatever. And so, choice, if I were I have been a parent, I desperately wanted my kids to be in a great school. And once I connected the dots and figured out what great was, it's like, oh my gosh, this
Yeah.
is hard to do. And so we did a fair amount of homeschooling. But if I'm a parent and my kid's in a school that's just pushing them to get good at very narrow, relevant skills, look for another school or give that kid support
Yeah.
to not chase a higher grade point average, but actually go deep on what they're interested in. And I think every family has that option.
And by the way, everybody who's listening to us, let me confess a little inside baseball here. My biggest frustration when I converse with this guy, Ted, is I have a gazillion questions and I want the conversation to continue for a day and a half. He frustrates me because he brings stuff up and I want to go in a million different directions. So we don't have a day and a half to talk. We'll do this again though, Ted. So now you come out with this son of a gun next week.
Yeah.
That I'm going to promote because I have read it. It's wonderful. Aftermath, the life-changing math that schools won't teach you. And there are people, Ted Dintersmith, listening to us right now that are thinking, interesting. Oh no, but a book about math?
Yeah. Well, and that's my hurdle, right? As soon as you say those 4 words, a book about math, I'm prepared for somebody to say, well, thank you very much. If suddenly everybody on this dropped off right now, that wouldn't be a total shock. But first, I wrote it intentionally in the style of Freakonomics. This is a book about math where you have to hunt to find any equations. And maybe every 40 pages, I will throw up an equation to say, oh, and by the way, this hairball expression is what a math geek would use to capture the idea I just explained to you in words and with pictures. So it is something that honestly, and I'm getting feedback from people who are working with like 10, 11, 12-year-olds with the book saying, let's do this, or what do you think about this, or let's talk about this. So in terms that any, maybe not a 5-year-old, but I mean, if you're age 10 to 100, you could understand what I'm talking about. I think I write clearly. I at least hope so.
You do.
And then I try to bring every one of these really interesting math ideas to life in the context of relevant, often quite powerful real world examples. And so the
What
other,
Ted?
yeah,
What overall big point are you trying to convey with this book, this new book?
well, it's the Buckminster Fuller once said, you don't get rid of a bad model with nothing. You get rid of a bad model by replacing with something way better. And so could I have written a book that was just throwing hand grenades at what we do now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could have. And would have that have felt good? That would have felt good. But I felt like, no, that's not a really great contribution. And so instead, and I do feel, and this will sound a bit immodest, and maybe it is, but I feel like I've been able to bring to life essentially every modern era math idea that makes or breaks us, that determines our most important health decisions or our finance decisions or whether civil society functions or areas of science or, you know, and that's not an easy mission. And
Right.
it's a short book. It's not like a 6,000 page book. It's a
Yeah.
250-page book. But, it is true. Like, let's take an example, algorithms, right? Algorithms to a very large extent control what we read, what we watch, and what we believe.
Yep.
And yet most of us who go through school, I mean, everybody listening, did you cover algorithms in school? Probably not. They lost out to piecewise linear functions or the cube root of -27 or the
Yeah.
definition of an irrational number, and your head explodes, right? Why is anybody spending time on these esoteric math micro tidbits that scientists and engineers don't even use? And we don't cover something vital like an algorithm.
Did I hear you right, Ted, in a conversation we had a few weeks ago that, and if I'm off on this, hit me. In your professional life, you don't think you've used any math that you learned in school?
I used none of the math, the symbols and abstract. I mean, I
Got it.
never did any of that. And there's sort of this, and that's the point I'm making, is there are the math ideas, which are fascinating and powerful and understandable, yet very few adults understand them.
Yeah.
And then there's all the esoteric, formulas. And I did that, right? I mean, like, I think I've come at this from a position of credibility because I have lead author published papers and I have a PhD in math modeling. And, I've done that. I've lived that world. I went back to the time before computers were right at your fingertips. So I actually had to do closed form integrals by hand, hairball
Yeah.
difficult closed form integrals by hand to get a couple lead author publications as an undergrad, which is not that usual. But that was then, and I say in my book that would be done in 60 seconds today. People, even scientists and engineers at the companies making airplanes or designing cars or what, they're not doing closed form integrals by hand. Yet, what's the pinnacle of math success in high school? Calculus. What do we often skip over? Statistics. Makes zero sense.
So Ted, I make you king of the world tomorrow. You design the math curriculum for every school in this country. Broadly speaking, what are you doing?
Yeah, I'd probably take the 4 years, the algebra, geometry, trig, algebra 2 or pre-calc and calculus. I would turn almost all of that into an elective.
Ah,
And I would say, you first and foremost, let's start with the ideas. Because in my world, I would much rather have everybody coming out of high school loving math, understanding its power and relevance, being able to explain and understand the key ideas, and knowing how to explore and take those ideas forward in their life using AI. Because AI, when I started writing the book, ChatGPT could not add 3 numbers together. Now, now it's proving math theorems, and proofs that Fields Medal winners can't do. So it's really good, but it doesn't know what questions to ask. It doesn't know what ideas are relevant to a problem or an opportunity you're taking
yeah,
on. And it doesn't know what to push back on. And if you read my book, I would say like 2,000 hours of high school math you never use, 4 or 5 hours to read a book that will change the way you think about math and life seems like a good trade off. I would say every kid needs to understand those ideas and it would be really fun. And they'd be coming home saying, God, I love math. I mean, math is the coolest thing in the world. And each of my chapters, by design, by intention, I start each of my chapters with something I've either observed or done with kids in grade 3 through 8. It's
ah,
not graduate school math.
yeah,
My estimation chapter starts with take a glass vase that's kind of an oddball shape, fill it with jelly beans or gummy bears or pennies, and ask kids, come up with as many ways as you can to estimate how many gummy bears are in the jar. I mean, like the third graders, they explode, and
Yeah.
it sort of takes on this perception. And then it was an opinion offered by somebody with a great deal of power over math education in our country, who said in this interview, "Math is unique among all disciplines because in math there is always one right answer." And I'm like, "You're only saying that because you don't understand math." And in graduate school, I took a course called The Art of
The
Mathematical Modeling.
art of
And over and over, I show, like, when you're trying to predict something, when you're trying to create think about what Michael Lewis and Billy Beane did with Moneyball statistics.
Yeah.
I mean, you tell me that's not immensely creative? That didn't ripple through to industry after industry who just said, "What statistics would make sense that would be great that we could create that would give us insight and help us be more effective in what we're trying to accomplish?"
So we're not doing
So
that
cool,
now.
right? I mean, like, really, it is doggone cool, and yet we miss it all.
Your
And
your your vase with gummy bears, we're not doing that in our schools now, are we?
Well, you'll find it every once in a while. I mean,
Every
people
once in a
will,
while.
but it's viewed as a distraction,
Uh,
like we're gonna get away from the math that you really need. You know, what's really important here is for our 6th graders or 5th graders to be able to add 1/3 to 1/7 to 1/23rd by getting the common denominator. And I'm like, when is the last time anybody listening has added 1/3 to 1/5 to 1/23rd, or whatever I said? It's like that's why we have calculators, right? And the thing we view as maybe occasionally a distraction to give them a break, what if that's actually what they should be doing?
so Ted, one of our listeners just said, "Math is powerful. We use it every day of our lives." You would concur.
I totally concur. And hey, look no further than AI, which is pure math.
Another listener said, "I love math too, Ted, but my kids both struggle immensely with it."
Yeah. It's when they do surveys, and you gotta be careful with surveys, but
Yeah.
it's almost all, some will say 75%, some 80%. Most adults have a great dislike for math. Most adults got punished by math in school. And by the way, my last chapter talks about the tragic, ironic consequences of math confusion.
Yeah.
It's really important to make this point is that the high stakes exams we use are explicitly designed and graded on a bell curve. We know what a bell curve is.
Yeah.
And a bell curve means, by definition, only a small number are excellent.
Right.
It's a very narrow tail, which means that every kid is pitted against each other in competition to make sure they can answer every math question on the SAT, not just a few. And you look at that and you say, we're destroying mental health with that. And you say, well, there must be some great logic. And I have this quote, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's from the College Board that says, basically, there's nothing about a bell curve that reflects human aptitude or potential. We picked it because it's a convenient and familiar statistical shape.
Yeah.
But it has enormous ramifications
Yeah.
because it means if like you've just got to be going all in on this esoterica that we know no one ever use, or you pay a penalty of dropping 10 percentage points on these tests. And it's not the same as saying, we're going to thoughtfully and diagnostically test kids to see if they have basic math fluency or basic reading skills. It is a dog eat dog, high stakes competition, having kids chase things they're never going to use, destroying mental health in the process.
So again, the knucklehead I am, Ted, you're saying in this book, Aftermath, coming out next week, we use math every day of our adult lives. We're not teaching kids in school how we will use that math to help excite
No.
them.
Yeah. Early in my book, I have a fictitious, but anyway, not terribly, off the mark inbox, an email inbox. And it's like, how are we going to estimate project costs for the new thing at work? Estimation. We will, in fact, half of our species be extinct by the year 2100, which is the sixth extinction says, true or not. Are driverless cars safe? Yes or no? Jobs report said X. Is that a credible number? I mean, our world every single day, from when we sit down at the TV and look at what Netflix recommends to what we read in our news feed to the numbers, the studies, everything, it is all shaped by math that very few adults understand.
One of our listeners, Ted, had a question. Is one of the problems, Ted, the fact that maybe too many of our teachers dislike math?
I know. Well, I think a lot of people are right to dislike the math that's still stuck in the curriculum.
Yeah.
And, I have to say when I took this book out, I was like, "Oh, like, what are math teachers gonna think?" Because, it's like I dedicated my life to teaching my students arc secants, and this guy comes along and says it's a colossal waste of time. Like I'm expecting them to be like, "Boy, I don't go away." And I've gotten a huge amount of response. I mean, they know, right? They're tired of students saying, "When am I ever gonna use it?" And have to cross their fingers and say, "Trust me, it will come in handy someday." They know it won't. And so I think they would be
Yeah.
incredibly and the beauty is, right, that they don't have to, when it's steeped in understandable ideas, which any math teacher could read this book and they say, "Got it, got it, got it."
Yeah.
Tied to relevant challenges that you can unleash kids on, math class becomes unbelievably fun. And math class, by the way, starts to move into every other discipline. There are math issues in social studies and civics, math issues in history, math issues in any science for sure, math issues in art, math issues in sports. I mean, math
Are
is a
you
way to
are you ta
understand it. Yeah.
Ted, are you talking about applied mathematics? Is that generally what we're talking about or no?
I'd say applied math, but a lot of times applied math is, it's applied formula-free math.
Got it.
Like,
I like that.
like I call it revealing math because it's the math ideas that help us understand our world, take advantage of the math ideas instead of be victimized by those math ideas. And so, and I've taken my share of applied math courses as well as theoretical math courses. And, like one way or another, as soon as they bury you in complex Riemann you just sort of like your head explode. And having taken all those courses and then spent my entire professional career in math intensive businesses, it is a bit noteworthy that I never used any of those form. I've got this great chart that opens the book. It was done by a revered longtime professor at Harvard Business School. And somebody was at a reunion and he put it up and they took a screenshot of it. And I know him, his name, Bill Salman, wonderful person. But it shows stages of life in math. And it goes up, up, up with more and more complicated math up through the end of school. And then it immediately drops to spreadsheet. And it's like, I thought, well, that says it all this math. And then when you get into the real world, if you know spreadsheets, you're in great shape.
The book is Aftermath, the life-changing math that schools won't teach you. I love that title and subtitle. Ted, who should read this book?
Well, it's a very interesting. I mean, I say first, if you read and enjoyed Freakonomics, please read it. I think it's written in the same style. I'm proud I got a great endorsement from Steve Levitt.
Yeah.
I think it's got really important real world tangencies that it brings out. So my hope is it reaches a broad audience, but I'd for sure say someone who went through school who ended up thinking they weren't that smart because of their high school math classes, read this book. You'll realize the problem was not you. It was the math you were taught and how you were tested. And I think any family that's dealing with a kid that just says like, like I'm not doing well. I don't like it. I feel like this book could be your lifeline because there are all
So,
sorts of things you can start doing with your kid on walks or car drives or the dinner table that start them to say, well, maybe I don't love the math of school, but I kind of do have a crush on math.
so parents with kids in school right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and yeah,
I'd love to have every legislator. That's one of the ironies, right? These legislators will pass these things, and you see it. Like of course, every kid has to take algebra 2 to get a high school degree, and they couldn't factor a polynomial if their life depended on it.
hey, Julie and everybody else, the name of the book is Aftermath, the life-changing math that schools won't teach you. I'm going to promote the shit out of this on every one of my platforms. I'm going to be talking about this book for a while. The book comes out next week. Everybody needs to buy it. You need to follow and subscribe to Ted Dintersmith on Substack as well. Ted, and yet all of this, again, I may be paraphrasing you. In the end, it's not really a book about math, is it?
I'd say honestly, I think it's a book about life, and I think
Explain.
yeah, well, because you think about what surrounds us daily, and what do we care about? We care about our health, we care about our financial status, we care about being able to engage constructively and collaboratively with those around us. We care about all of those things. And while it seems like, oh my gosh, is he really saying that? I think our colossal botch of math in school underlies lots that is tearing our country apart. And you say, like, well, that seems like a bridge too far. But if you read this book, I think you'll say, no, there's actually a direct connection. And particularly, right, the because of that bell curve, most kids come through school feeling like they're not in some way proficient.
Yeah.
That's a major issue. You think about the young male issue in our country,
Yeah.
big issue. But at the same time, that's thousands of hours that they're pouring down the drain only because it serves the convenience of the testing industry to rank and sort our kids. And so if you redirected those hours to something that actually helped them be more productive, like 2,000 hours on arc sequence and peace, or 2,000 hours getting really good at using AI to make yourself and those around you more productive. Tell me which one's a better balance. 2,000 hours on memorizing formulas or 10 hours learning how to fact check? Which is,
That-
I mean, these are
and
massive numbers of hours that we use to rank, sort, and largely punish instead of empower, engage, and elevate.
in a nutshell, that's almost a
Yep.
great
Yep.
thesis of the book. I've got 3 more for you, my friend,
Okay, I'm ready.
and then I'll let you go, Paul Revere. Um, okay. Our schooling, our educational system is still back in the wheel buggy, the buggy days. We're not, again, technology, computers, internet, now AI. What, and I can hear everybody listening to us asking me one simple question, and this could be a 2-hour answer, but it can't be. What, Ted, do we do?
Well, it certainly depends on circumstances. So let's start with what a lot of people are, which is a parent or a grandparent. The question I ask, and this is less of a math question and more, make the decision. Do you care most about the decal for the college that goes on your rear view, window? Or do you care more about having a happy, purposeful kid with skills that matter? And whatever your circumstances are, you've got discretion over a lot of free time. And so maybe a school doesn't, which most schools are running from AI instead of embracing it. But in those spare hours, you can either pound on your kid to get a slightly higher score in Algebra 2 on something they're never going to use, which gives them a slightly better chance to get into a slightly more selective college, which may not actually be a particularly good path for that kid. Or you could say, let's direct those hours toward taking on interesting problems in your community or opportunities you can create. And in the process, learn how to master AI to be able to accomplish something dramatic and remarkable. We all have that choice, right? Play the
Okay.
game that's there or just say, I have at the end of I have to get this in. At the end of
Yeah.
my book, I've got this biology metaphor, and it's something called an ant mill, but a better name might be ant death spiral. But you have these long trains of ants, and you see this in nature, long trains of ants where every ant is genetically programmed to follow the ant in front of them. And the lead ant gets confused and winds its way back to the back of the pack. And then those ants just march in a circle forever until they've all died.
Yeah.
And the point I make is each one of those ants has the power to be the lead ant, to say, I'm not going to do what's put in front of me. I'm not going to do same old, same old. And so parents with their kid, grandparents with their grandkids, or adults in their life have the ability to just break free and say, I'm doing something different.
So I'm gonna sneak in an extra question. I get that. Very succinctly, what do our schools need to do to meet this moment?
Yeah, two things there. I'd say schools are generally governed by state policies, federal policies, school boards. We will be doing something in the next few months on, can you pass an eighth grade algebra test? So I think we need to push the people with power to take the exams that hold kids back or rank them and say, can you actually factor a polynomial? Almost no one can.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing. And so if we could do that and start to say, if we're going to hold our schools, we're going to get tough and hold our schools accountable, hold our kids accountable, hold our teachers accountable. Let's make sure it's something that matters. So I think that's really an important thing we can do. And it's sort of a very civic oriented enterprise. And we've got this film we didn't talk about, a new film out called Multiple Choice.
Yeah.
And same thing with Most Likely to Succeed. We're rolling it out across communities all over the country. We've got, I think, 1,300 in our pipeline. And it's not a math film, but it's a film that shows schools that let kids experience far more career-based learning, but not those kids, but all kids. It shows internships and apprenticeships, the power of bringing local adults, businesses into constructive collaboration with teachers and students. And it shows kids that are encouraged to get really good at AI. And if you want to future proof your kids in the world of AI and have a really good chance of future proofing your community, these are the goals you should have. And so we're doing that. We're trying to apply pressure at the top, and we're trying to build grassroots support because it's urgent, right? AI is serious. It's really good. If you've been trained for 16 years to do assignments that are knowledge worker assignments, you are going to find nobody wants to hire you.
Yeah.
And that today is the be all and end all of school as we currently constitute it.
The film Multiple Choice came out last year, correct?
October.
I don't. Everybody, I'm gonna push and promote the film as well, so you will hear from me about it all. Ted, 2 more big quickies.
Okay.
College, wake up, America! Not everybody needs to go to college. Take it away.
Well, I'll put my funnel into your show notes, but does college work out incredibly well for some? Yes. Was college an incredible thing to take on when I was getting out of my last year? I went to a state college. My last year, tuition for the entire year, $250. I covered it all with my summer job. I covered tuition, room, and board with the summer job. And college used to be a guaranteed path to a great job. Yeah. So in the rearview mirror, it's a great proposition. And today, for some kids who take it incredibly seriously, and some do, and can leave without being saddled with student loan debt. So I'm not saying terrible idea, but look at the funnel, right? Start in 9th grade. About 14 out of 100 kids never finish high school, largely driven off by, 80% of kids who don't get their high school degree is because of algebra. Okay, so they're in a world of hurt, right?
Yeah.
The kids that leave and go to community college are almost always stuck in remedial math and drop out because they don't see a point. They're in hurt. Of the kids that start in 4-year college, 6 years later, somewhere around 40% don't finish. They're in real trouble. Of those that finish, a large number, over half, 10 years later, don't have a job consistent with a college degree. And then those who do have it all on paper look right are often a job they hate that pays them well, but they have to keep that job to pay off their student loan. So maybe it's working really well for 10, 15%.
That's it.
But that's it. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying if we were more like other countries where it was a more relaxed thing, you want to go to college, great. It's not this rat race for getting into tier A versus tier B versus tier C versus, tier D,
Yeah.
And it was affordable. But I mean, we have made college the be all and end all goal of our high schools, turned the entire high school curriculum into college prep. And kids, it's just not that guaranteed that we assume. Nor is it in my book, by the way, debunked. So, Georgetown keeps throwing out these headlines that says, well, a college degree is still worth $1.2 million of incremental lifetime earnings. Then the next study is, well, 37 million adults are drowning in student loan debt. And I say, well, where did those incremental earnings? But I debunk it. I use basic estimation math to say it's not 1.2 million. It's much lower. And that's backward looking.
Okay, big final question number 2. AI, it's here, everybody. Embrace it. Don't fear it.
Yeah. I actually think in some ways AI is a renaissance for the liberal arts. I think that, how often, and I'll give myself some credit because in 2015, Obama said, that in the 21st century, everyone has to learn how to code. And I know them well. And so I was able to get to him. And I just said no. In the 21st century, coding skills are going away. and 10 years later, 11 years later, coding skills are gone, right? Like nobody is hacking code anymore. A friend of mine says English is a new programming language. And so a lot of those not all, but a lot of the way we construe and teach and develop STEM skills, again, are exactly what AI does brilliantly. And a lot of the safe jobs, whether it's coding or accountants or lawyers, I mean, all the jobs we've been saying are safe jobs are often risky jobs. But, the humanities, I think, still play a really great role in, creativity and curiosity and critical thinking. And I love the concept of a major and minor, whether it's in high school or college or life, of I'm really good at X that I love, music creation, writing, whatever. But my minor is being really good at using AI because the people who are good at it run circles around everyone else. And so it's not that AI is going to take every job, but a few people who can use AI will replace dozens who can't. And and then you say, like, why in a million years, given that, would we want to spend 2,000-3,000 hours on math no adult uses and say, but you can't use AI because you're cheating? I mean, honestly, that makes no sense.
Everybody can understand why this man is like a Paul Revere. Just when I listen to him.
Although I couldn't ride a horse. The last time Joe, when I was with my family, we tried to ride a horse. They gave up because I couldn't open my legs enough to get on the horse. It's like it was pitiful. So,
Ted Dintersmith.
The horseless Paul Revere.
Paul Revere, but he can't ride a horse. My final one for you, mister, is, and I think you wrote this in 2010.
Yeah.
Think about this. You said these words in 2010, 16 years ago. As millions enter adulthood ill-prepared, we sow the seeds for democracy's collapse. You wrote that 16 years ago.
Yeah. And back then, nobody, you say democracies. Honestly, people thought of me as like that guy on the corner with the long beard and the end of days sign. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, even my wife said, I think you've lost it, Ted. And but it's like, if you, for generations, turn out young adults who've been told by school they're not proficient, who leave school with no hireable skills, no sense of the satisfaction of being a contributing, responsible citizen, in a rat race that's largely destroying mental health without empowering kids with useful skills, what happens, right? And if you do that for 40 years, welcome to America 2026.
The book, everybody, is Aftermath. It comes out next week. The life-changing math that schools won't teach you. Ted Dintersmith is the author. It's a book about math. It's a book about life. Get it, buy it, read it with your school kids, read it with your family, read it with anybody. Ted Dintersmith has been my guest. Again, I could go on for hours. Do me a favor, everybody. Follow this young man. Subscribe to him on Substack. You're going to get interesting thinking like this every single week. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Ted.
Thanks for you. I've seen what you're doing in the field. You're doing hero's work, and I'm very grateful for your contributions.
Well, I am a mini Paul Revere, and Ted, I too am afraid of horses. I can't ride horses. So
we're gonna be in one of those horse-drawn carriages in Central Park.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Buy Ted's book. Ted, my friend, thank you.
Thank you. Loved it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, follow, and share The Social Contract with Joe Walsh on Apple, Spotify. Plus, don't forget to subscribe to The Social Contract on Substack. This has been The Social Contract with Joe Walsh.